Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John. We're in John chapter 6. Today we start at verse 22. Now the first 21 verses of this chapter, the author John has related two more miracles of Jesus. He does them in quick succession. The feeding of the multitude with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then Jesus walking on the water. Now the rest of the chapter is going to be taken up with the conversation Jesus is going to have with people who are seeking him about the bread of heaven. That comes from the first miracle. Now, remember the scene. After Jesus had fed the multitudes, they had wanted to make Jesus king by force, so Jesus withdrew from them up into the mountains for prayer. And during that evening, while he's up in the mountains, the disciples get in the boat and cross the Sea of Galilee back to the other side. That's when Jesus walks through the water on them. Now the crowd didn't go with the disciples or follow the disciples because they knew Jesus was up on the mountain. But the next morning they come to realize he's not there, so they begin to look for him. And this is going to set the scene for the conversation about the bread of heaven. But let's see what happens. Verse 22. Now the next day the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake, they realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but that they had gone away alone. So they knew that the disciples had left, but they knew Jesus was still on their side of the lake up in the hills. But then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. And once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats, they went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. It seemed that these other boats that landed probably came with some news. Well, Jesus is over there with his disciples. And of course they're wondering, well, how did Jesus get over there? That we saw the disciples leave, but Jesus was up in the mountains. He hasn't really had time, has he, to walk around the lake? But anyway, they go to look for him. They go to Capernaum in their boats searching for Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? How is it you got over here, Lord? There's not been enough time for you to walk around the edge of the lake, and we saw the disciples take the boat and go. You weren't with it. How did you get here? They don't know about the walking on the water, but they know that somehow Jesus is over there when he should have been still up in the hills, or at least just on their side of the lake, or at the worst, just taking the time to walk around the lake. How did you get here? Jesus says, truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, nor for food, but rather look for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval. Notice what Jesus says. He doesn't even answer that question about how he got there or when he got there. But he says, why are you looking for me? You're looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves. Well, the loaves, the eating of the loaves, the feeding of the multitude was the sign. But what Jesus is saying is, you ate the loaves, you had a good meal, but you did not recognize what it was a sign of. You see, it was supposed to point you to who I am. Instead, all you were concerned about was that you got to eat a good meal. You missed the point of the sign. Yes, you saw it, but you did not see it. Yes, you were there for the miracle, but you did not perceive what it meant. You know, there's another time in the gospel Jesus says you have eyes to see, but you don't see. You have ears to hear, but you don't hear. That's kind of what's going on here. You saw the miracle, and it was the sign, but you missed the sign because you did not realize what it was pointing to. Don't be so concerned about just food for the moment. Be concerned about food that endures to eternal life. Now, this is very similar to something Jesus told the Samaritan woman a while back about water and living water. He said, I can give you living water. You'll never be thirsty again. Now he's talking about a food he can give that will satisfy your eternal hungers. So don't just be concerned about physical food, but about spiritual food, or about the bread of heaven. Now this is going to start a rather lengthy conversation that will engage the rest of this chapter as Jesus talks to them about the bread of heaven. So I hope you'll be with us for our next 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of John as he begins to talk to them about this bread of heaven, a bread that leads to eternal life, a bread which he, the Son of Man, can give. We'll begin to talk about that in our next session.